foul. No. Anthony for three. Bang! That one goes down, and the game is tied. In the hands of Anthony. Anthony for three. Puts it in! Knicks by one with 8.2 remaining.
As you all very well know at this point, Carmelo Anthony has announced his retirement. And what I want to say to Carmelo himself is congrats on having an amazing NBA career, one of the most prolific scorers in league history, multiple All-Star and Olympic game appearances, future Hall of Famer. Enough can be said about Carmelo and his contributions to the game of basketball. And one of the things that's difficult for all-time greats, whether it be sports, whether it be music, film, whatever, it's very difficult to step away from the game, especially when you feel like you can still perform at a high level. But there comes a point in time in everyone's career, again, whether depending on whatever industry it is, it doesn't matter, where you have to say enough is enough. You've put in the work. You've had an amazing run, but you can't run the same. You can't sing the same. You can't do many of the things the same as you once were able to do in your prime. And one of the things for Carmelo that made it a lot easier for him to retire is the fact that he is at peace with his decision. Now, the question that we're going to ask ourselves today is Carmelo Anthony perhaps the most impressive, best, greatest Knick performer ever? Now, I know when you hear that question immediately, you may think of the, all-time Knick greats like Walt Cry Frazier, Patrick Ewing, just to name a couple. We'll get into some articles on how those players rank, and we'll also take a look at what you guys think, what the fans think in terms of who is the best Knick player ever. But before we get to that, guys, I just want to take a look at an article from people.com highlighting Carmelo Anthony's comments and reasoning for why he ultimately came to the decision to, retire from the NBA. So let's take a look. Carmelo Anthony says he's at peace retiring without a championship ring. I've won at life. Carmelo says he isn't bothered by the fact that he's retiring from the NBA after 19 seasons without a championship. In an interview with Sports Illustrated published Tuesday, a day after Melo, 38, announced his retirement from the league, the star athlete and reality TV personality brushed off the notion that his time as a professional is not complete because it lacks a championship. Again, when I immediately heard about the news of Carmelo Anthony announcing his retirement, I posted on Twitter, posted on YouTube, and I said that, despite not winning a championship, not coming away with a ring, he did manage to capture the hearts of New Yorkers. And for his epic performances as a member of the New York Knicks, he will always be revered as a staple of this franchise, regardless of the fact that he didn't win a championship. In an interview, I'm at peace now. He told SI, that doesn't bother me no more. That idea that you're a loser if you don't win a championship. For me, I've won. I've won back in 2003. The night I shook David Stern's hand on that draft stage. I made it out of Red Hook. I won at life. The ring is the only thing I didn't get. It would have been a great accomplishment, but I don't regret it because I feel like I did everything I could to get it. And, Carmelo's speaking facts, right? He didn't take the easy way out. He didn't join up with, mega teams joining like LeBron James, even though there was that rumor out there that before Miami's big three came together of D-Wade, LeBron, and Chris Bosh, that Carmelo Anthony was actually the first, option that either LeBron or Wade was talking about uniting together before they ultimately decided to go with Chris Bosh. But nevertheless, he never joined up with a super team. He stayed faithful to his organizations, whether that be with Denver, whether that be with New York. It didn't work out in either situation, but Carmelo Anthony gave it his all. I don't think there's anyone that will question Carmelo Anthony's effort in terms of what he gave to his team. Now, speaking about, let's go, rewind back a little bit when Carmelo Anthony joined the Knicks team. I wasn't a fan, to be honest. Now, I was a huge fan of Carmelo Anthony, but if you remember that year that we traded for him, right, we had Amari Stoudemire. I believe that was the first year that Amari came on the team. We had Wilson Chandler, Danilo Gallinari, Landry Fields. That team was gelling, and right before the trade deadline, we were starting to make some noise. I believe we made it to 500, and we were starting to look a lot like a real team. And then all of a sudden, we made the trade for Carmelo, gutting the entire team, which pretty much hampered our chances of being a true contender. Now, again, going back to that season, if you remember, Carmelo Anthony made it known throughout the league that he was going to join the New York Knicks. And with that, we were under the impression that, it's going to be an easy signing him as a free agent in the summer. So that's what we all were waiting for. But I forget who was the GM at the time, but James Dolan forced his hand and said, no, we need to get Carmelo now. And, history is all she wrote. Carmelo Anthony gets traded to the New York Knicks, and unfortunately that gutted the entire team, which didn't really give us many options to compete. We had Chauncey Billups in that trade, which was a good addition, but it wasn't the Chauncey Billups of old. He was a bit past his prime at that point. But anyway, let's continue on. Anthony began his NBA career when he was drafted 3rd overall for the Denver Nuggets, where he played from 2003 to 2011. From there, he became something of a journeyman, playing for the New York Knicks, Oklahoma City Thunder, Houston Rockets, Portland Trailblazers, and finally the Los Angeles Lakers. Now, despite, all the hoopla, again, as I mentioned, I would have loved to see that team, how they would have performed before bringing in Carmelo Anthony in a trade. But he did come to the Knicks that year. We did make it to the playoffs. We made it to back-to-back playoff appearances while Carmelo Anthony was a part of the team. And it was the best we've looked since going back to the 1999-2000 Knicks, where we went to the NBA Finals. And, while a lot of that credit is not all on Carmelo Anthony's shoulders, he shouldered the bulk of that responsibility, and he took it upon himself to be the leader of that team and, galvanize us into that position. Now, one of the special things I would say about Carmelo Anthony that sets himself apart from many Knicks players was the fact that he made it public that he wanted to be a part of this team. Now, we know how this works with free agents, that no one really wants to take it upon themselves to shoulder the responsibility of carrying a Knicks team. But Carmelo Anthony wasn't afraid of that moment. He took it upon himself and say, hey, yeah, I want to go play for the Knicks. And for the most part, it was a successful run, even though we didn't get anywhere close to where we intended to go. NBA Commissioner Adam Silver called Anthony one of the NBA's all-time great players and ambassadors in a statement. We congratulate him on a remarkable 19-year career and look forward to seeing him in the Hall of Fame. Yeah, again, I think there's no one that watches basketball, that knows basketball, that will say that Carmelo Anthony is not a future Hall of Famer. Again, it's not always about winning championships. Of course, that's the, what you want to do ultimately. That's what you play the game for. But there's many things that you can do that will elevate your career. And let's get into some of the things that Carmelo Anthony has added to his resume despite not winning a championship at the NBA level. While he may not have an NBA ring, Melo did help Team USA earn 3 gold medals in the Olympics. He has 6 All-NBA team selections, and prior to being drafted, he won a national championship with Syracuse. So yeah, again, while he doesn't have a chip in the NBA, he has a national championship with Syracuse. He has 3 gold medals in the Olympics, which I believe he is either tied or has the most Olympic gold medals for any USA NBA basketball player, which is huge. You have the All-NBA selections, national championship. You even had that year when he was with the Knicks when we made it to the 2 seed. I'm sorry. Yeah, I believe it was a 2 seed. We made it to the second round and we lost against the Indiana Pacers. He was in the running for MVP that year. So Carmelo Anthony had an amazing career, not just with the Knicks, but overall. And he deserves a lot of credit, And, to finish off this article in terms of his legacy, he seemingly to put all of his interest into making sure that his son Kyan is developing the right way. I'm not sure if he's NBA ready, but he's still a little bit young. We'll see what he can do. He has the length. I like some of his game. He's not at the level of like a Bronny James, but we'll see what happens with Kyan. I think he has, the DNA. He just has to work at his game. That's all. But in terms of asking, the question, is Carmelo Anthony the best Knick ever? There's a lot of things that you need to think about in order to really evaluate that question and come up with a legitimate answer. But one area that I want to shift to next is looking at, just give me one moment, looking at who are many of the greatest NBA players that haven't won a championship, just to get a little bit of a perspective on how this all looks when you look at it in a macro point of view. So let's take a look at who are the 10 best NBA players to never win a championship. All right, so at number 10, you have Reggie Miller, the ultimate Knick killer. Deserves to be on that list. Made it to 1 NBA Finals. At the time of his career, he was labeled the best three-point shooter ever. And while he's still in the, I would say top 5, top 10 list of 3-point shooters, obviously you have guys like Steph Curry that surpassed him. But for a long time, Reggie Miller was known as the best 3-point shooter in the league. We know his pedigree, great player, but never won a championship. At number 9, we have none other than Carmelo Anthony. And, we're talking all about what he has contributed to the game, so he needs to go further there. At number 8, you got AI. Coincidentally, AI and Carmelo was on the Denver team. And if you remember, the furthest that Carmelo Anthony has made it in the playoffs was in the Western Conference Finals. And that was with the Denver Nuggets. I believe that was with AI. And ultimately, they lost to the Lakers, and the Lakers won the championship. And we know how great AI was. At number 7, you have Steve Nash, 2-time MVP, one of the better point guards in league history. You also have at number 6, Patrick Ewing. Yes, indeed. My favorite Knick of all time. I will say we'll get into the details of how people think is the best Knick in terms of the true Knick greats. But Patrick Ewing, great player, all-star, Hall of Famer. He was a staple of the Knicks, 90s Knicks for, like a 10-year period. And that team was amazing. So we know what Patrick Ewing is about. At number 5, we have Chris Paul, the point guard, who is arguably the best point guard in NBA history. You also have at number 4, Elgin Baylor, the legend. At number 3, you have John Stockton. Again, another one of the great point guards that, in my mind, didn't get enough recognition in his time, but John Stockton was a great player. At number 2, you have none other than Sir Charles Barkley. We know his greatness. He never won a championship. And at number 1, I think you guys can guess, is Karl Malone with the duo of Karl Malone and John Stockton. We know how great they were, but we know they didn't win a championship because they were in the era of Michael Jordan. And, Patrick Ewing never won a championship in large part to Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan is responsible for a lot of great players not winning championships. So there you have it. Carmelo Anthony is on a short list of great players that never won a championship. But again, if you're just evaluating guys' value by their championships, for instance, let's take a look at a guy like Robert Horry. Robert Horry has something like 4 or 5 championships now. While he was, he did contribute to those championships, of course. Is Robert Horry one of the greatest players ever because he has 5 championships? Absolutely not. So when we're talking about, evaluating people's, legacy based exclusively on championships, that's not really the right approach because it takes a lot more to what makes a player, in terms of, all the different things, all the bells and whistles. And it's not exclusively just the championship that makes them great. But, the last thing I want to, move into and shift to is what the audience thinks. Now, I put up a poll a couple of days ago asking the question, who is the greatest Knick ever? And on the list, I included some of our, Knick greats, all-time greats, Walt Frazier, Earl Monroe, Bernard King, Patrick Ewing, Carmelo Anthony. Apologies to Willis Reed. One of my subscribers mentioned in the comments, nobody's mentioning Willis. I accidentally left Willis Reed off the list. And when I posted the poll, I'm like, oh no, I forgot Willis off the list. But let's take a look at the numbers. So we got Walt Frazier at 40%. We have Earl Monroe, unfortunately, at 0%. Bernard King at 20%. Patrick Ewing at 32%. And Carmelo Anthony at 8%. So there you have it. According to the people, we have Walt Clyde Frazier as the greatest Knick ever. And there's no surprise there. Obviously, that's an easy pick. Although my greatest Knick ever is Patrick Ewing. I'm biased because obviously, growing up, that was the best player in the Knicks. And that was the reference that I had for the New York Knicks at the time. I was unfortunately not alive to witness the Knicks championships in the run of Walt Clyde Frazier and those guys. So I didn't really get to have a real opinion on Walt Clyde Frazier, although I know he should be up there, if not considered the best Knicks player ever, up there as one of the best, all because of the fact that he is a part of that team that won championships. So I may have said that championships are not everything, but they do count for a lot. And if you are a team like us, the Knicks, that haven't won a championship in more than 50 years, then obviously you're going to look at a guy like Walt Clyde Frazier as being considered one of the Knick greats or the best Knick ever. And it's not just about the championships. You know, Walt Clyde Frazier in his day was one of the elite guards in the NBA on both ends, offensively and defensively. So it's not a Robert Horry situation at all. Walt Clyde Frazier was that dude. He was great. Obviously, you have Bernard King, and, you know, a lot of people would say that Carmelo Anthony was sort of like the second coming of Bernard King, you know, again, being a prolific scorer. But in terms of the poll guys, we see that Carmelo Anthony is in fourth place. You know, you got Walt in first, Patrick in second, Bernard King in third, and Carmelo Anthony in fourth. So I think collectively, most Knick fans are on the side of, while we appreciate Carmelo Anthony's contributions as an NBA player, his specific contributions to the New York Knicks, I don't think we look at him as a Knick great, better than Patrick Ewing or better than, you know, Walt Clyde Frazier. You can make the argument between him and Bernard King. I think they're pretty much similar in terms of what they've done for this team. But I think for the most part, as we see with the poll, most people would say it's either between Walt Clyde Frazier or Patrick Ewing. Me personally, I would go with Patrick, again, for my own personal reasons. But, yeah, I have no issue with people voting Walt Clyde Frazier, again, for his accolades. And, you know, one thing that needs to be spoken about with Walt Clyde Frazier, if you think about all the Knicks in the past, the alumni, Walt Clyde Frazier is still a part of this Knicks team in a very large way, being a commentator for the Knicks games for a number of years, still showing up to games, still showing the support. So Walt Clyde Frazier is still very much in the thick of things for the New York Knicks franchise, and I think that speaks volumes for your legacy, so to speak. But that's going to be all for the video, guys. I just wanted to, you know, give a quick shout out to Carmelo. Although he is not considered to be the greatest Knick ever, he is one of the greatest Knicks ever, greatest players to put on a Knicks uniform. And despite, again, the fact that he didn't win a championship, he is considered great for all his other accolades on and off the court. And I wish Carmelo Anthony, you know, a great retirement. You know, he's not an old guy. He's still in his prime of his life. And at this point, he can just focus on developing his son, focusing on developing other businesses. Carmelo Anthony will be fine. I believe there's talk out there that the Knicks organization is looking to retire his jersey. Again, he was drafted from Denver, but we know very well, everyone knows that he is a member of the New York Knicks, truly. And I would be happy to see Carmelo Anthony's jersey retired if that actually plays out that way, which I'm sure it will. But anyway, that's going to be the end of the video, guys. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you agree with this poll. Do you agree that Walt Clyde Frazier is, in fact, the greatest Knick ever? Are you like me, where you believe that Patrick Ewing is the greatest Knick ever? Or are you, you know, some of you new generation guys that was around to witness in your youth, the Carmelo Anthony Knicks? Do you think that this poll is incorrect? Do you think that Carmelo Anthony is the greatest Knick ever? Either or, I think each of them have their own rights to make the claim. But again, that's all for this video, guys. So catch you on a rebound. Catch you next time. We're going to talk a little bit more next time about player grades. We're going to go through each player, talk about their off-season, their regular season, how they fared in the playoffs, and ultimately come up with a grade for each player. But catch you on a rebound, guys. Peace.